Cork Harbour Special Protection Area, or SPA, is an internationally important nature conservation site for the protection of birds, particularly migratory birds. It's part of a network of sites across Europe established under the EU Birds Directive and Habitats Directive. Cork Harbour Special Protection Area was set up under the Birds Directive. The SPA covers a large part of Cork Harbour, but only a small part is within the area examined for this Biodiversity Action Plan. On the National Parks and Wildlife Service website, npws.ie, if you click on Protected Sites, you'll get to a page where you can search for protected sites by county and by type of protected sites, for example. If you search for SPAs in Cork and click Submit, it'll generate a list. If you click on one that you're interested in, for example, Cork Harbour SPA, that takes you to a page where you can scroll through and find more information about a particular site that you're interested in. Cork Harbour SPA was designated for the protection of 23 different bird species. Many of these were recorded within the area examined for this Biodiversity Action Plan, including species such as the curlew and the redshank, whose survival in Ireland is threatened to some degree. Part of the reason Cork Harbour is so important for migrating and resident bird species is because of some of the habitats in the harbour. In particular, the mud shores or mud flats that are covered at high tide contain huge numbers of invertebrate species like snails and crustaceans and worms that are a food source for birds when the tide goes out. There are also other coastal wetland habitats that are part of the SPA and inside the Biodiversity Action Plan area. One of these is Upper Salt Marsh. It's quite a grassy looking habitat. One of the grass species is the greeny grey-leaved sea couch and the fine-leaved red fescue, which is often found in Upper Salt Marsh, as is sea rush. And in among the grasses and rushes you can find species such as sea milkwort, which is pretty when it's in flower, and also marsh arrowgrass. The larger, more colourful sea aster stands out quite strongly against the grasses. Behind the salt marsh stands of the impressive common reed form dense reed beds, a nice place to hide for shire bird species. Moving inland, we find ourselves in the Mangala, also known as Ballybrack Woods. And as the name suggests, there are woods in here. There's a mixture of non-native and native tree species in the canopy. There's non-native older beech, some ash and some oak. There's a well-developed shrub layer in some places with hazel and bramble and younger specimens of the trees found in the canopy. There's a field layer with different fern species. There's wood sedge here and quite a lot of bryophytes, mosses, with ivy quite a lot as well. In woods, the field layer is often most colourful in the spring before the trees put out their leaves to catch the light. In Ballybrack, there's wood anemone, bluebell, violet, primroses, lots and lots of lesser celandine, and even some woodruff putting out some early white flowers. Now, as well as woodland, in the Mangala there's also grassland, which adds to the overall biodiversity of the area. Lesser celandine can be found here in the springtime too. The largest area of grassland in the Mangala is near the north entrance from Church Road. For a few years now, Douglas Tidy Towns, with support from Cork County Council and now Cork City Council, have been managing grassland in this area of the Mangala in a traditional hay meadow style. This aims to increase the length of time that plants are in flower each year, and hopefully then to increase the diversity of plant species that are growing in this area. And ideally also the diversity of non-plant species too. Plant species growing here include wild angelica, white clover, a range of different grasses and rushes, meadowsweet, brook lime, marsh foxtail grass, silverweed, marsh bedstraw, which has a really pleasant smell, fool's watercress, and other plants that are typical of wet or damp places. In 2020, Wild Work, with help from local volunteers from the community, used traditional haymaking techniques and equipment to manage the meadow areas. If we leave the grassland area in the Mangala and start to head west a bit, we can make our way towards Doman's Wood. While Doman's Wood certainly has non-native tree species in the canopy such as sycamore and beech, some of which are quite mature, as well as some other non-native species such as lime, there are also native tree species in the canopy such as oak, ash, and underneath hazel. And along with hazel in the shrub layer, there's also native holly. There's another evergreen shrub with glossy leaves found in Doman's Wood, but unfortunately it's the invasive non-native shrub cherry laurel which tends to shade out native vegetation. Luckily there's not as much here as there is in the Mangala, and certainly not as much as there is in Grange Frankfield Wood. Because there are so many non-native trees in the canopy at Doman's Wood, it wouldn't be considered a semi-natural native woodland. However, the field layer is definitely more semi-natural. There's quite a bit of bramble and ferns, spring-flowering species like wood anemone and the lords and ladies. Then later in the year, there's yellow pimpernel, pignut, sanicle, and other species that are typical of a woodland called oak, ash, hazel woodland. And these species are mainly found on the slopes of Doman's Wood. Oak ash hazel woodland is a habitat described in A Guide to Habitats in Ireland, which is free to download from various places online, and a great way to learn about habitats in Ireland. On the valley floor, in places it can be quite a bit wetter, with wetland species such as wild angelica and greater tussock sedge, and tree species like willows and alders. There are earth banks in Doman's Wood that probably mark old property boundaries, and on some of these by the riverside you can find Irish spurge. This plant is only native in the southwest of Ireland, parts of France and northern Spain and Portugal. Like other spurges, the sticky sap can irritate some people's skin, so it's best not to pick it. Water can be heard in the background in many of the clips in this short video. The stream through Doman's Wood has a natural form for most of its journey through Doman's Wood, and I've seen young brown trout while I've been doing field work. But the stream has been modified now as it leaves Doman's Wood, although this seems to work for some species at least. And there are many other places of biodiversity value in and around Douglas. We haven't been able to look at all of them in this short video, but you can read more about them in the Douglas Biodiversity Action Plan supported by the Community Foundation for Ireland.